The Dick Cavett Show with Mort Sahl, actress Alice Clayton, critic John Simon, playwright and novelist Rosalind Drexler, and Bob Rosengarten and the orchestra. Ladies and gentlemen, Dick Cavett.
Hi. There's no rule that says you have to stay here. Were they heckling me? I couldn't tell. Anyway, nice to see you, and thank you for your alleged applause. And you will be assumed innocent, and, well, never mind. It's nice to see you. If I seem a little strange tonight, and I probably do, I was in a tank today with 4 whales. I really, that's what they always say, right? No, you may wonder why I was in a tank with 4 whales. Didn't you ever lose an election bet? This is funny. I was out at the New York Aquarium, and I dove into the tank with 4 whales, and we took some film of that. It'll be on a show later on. But I was all over the aquarium feeding fish to the whales, and so if I have a certain air tonight, they were very nice out there. One keeper of the whales was a little touchy. I said that they are a little smaller than I expected they were going to be, although they're enormous. But I said they're a little small, and he said, well, some of us I know aren't exactly John Wayne either. So I thought he was impertinent. He gave me the fish to give to the whales, and I said, do they get anything with this? And he said, maybe an impertinent little 67 Chablis, and I thought that was unnecessary. Took me for a yokel. It's funny to be up at 7 a.m. in New York. That's when I had to get up to go out there, so it's weird. New York is good. Coney Island at 7 a.m. is like the stage delicatessen on Yom Kippur, or Yom Kippur, whichever it is. They sometimes say Yom Kippur.
Only in Reform temples.
Just regular folks say Yom Kippur?
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Yes, okay. Well, I better get off that before I offend a few more people. Hey, New York, do you know, huh? Yeah.
How large were the whales, really?
The whales?
Yeah.
They were so large. No, they're big. They're white whales. They're not like the giant whale, but they're probably 12, 14 feet long. It's a little frightening. How big a whale have you been in a tank with? And don't mention any real names. Now, wait a minute. Hey, Steubenville's the dirtiest city. Did you read about that? No? No, they took a survey, a pollution survey. Steubenville is the dirtiest city in the country. I'm sorry, Steubenville. It was in the paper. But New York was not beaten out. We have the foulest air. So New Yorkers can throw their chests out, since we obviously aren't going to need them. It's terrible to think that if King Kong went to the top of the Empire State Building now, Fay Wray would starve to death before they saw her, you know? They don't even know if it's still there. It's really ridiculous. Dignitaries now ask for the key out of the city when they're... Anyway, they found a skeleton. You read about that? About 2,000-year-old skeleton out on Long Island. Some archaeologists. It was near where the Long Island Railroad cuts through. Oh, that isn't the end. And they found an old sort of papyrus scroll, and they interpreted it, and it turned out that it said, this was about 2,000, they dated about 2,000 years old. It said that in 90 days, the Long Island will be the finest commuter railroad in the country. The Penn Central had its 3rd fire this week. That's incredible. You realize that? But the electricity they're saving on the Penn Central, they managed to light a "Don't Walk" sign in Flushing. So, or a "Don't Flush" sign in Norwalk, or I don't know what else. I told you, I'm strange. I've been in with whales today. I don't know what I'm saying. Subways are weird, though, Mort. Have you been on our subways? Anyone? Don't be too frightened of them. For one thing, they're trying to get new motormen. Most of the good ones have gone to Hollywood as stuntmen. But Rockefeller said the other night on television that the subways are the safest mode of transportation. He really did. He said that they are, he bases that on the fact that in, 30, 40 years of being in New York, never once has a subway run into his limousine. They're not scary. Don't be frightened by the insurance machines, right, when they sell you your token. It's all right. What else we do? Oh, Bonwit Teller's, a store in New York. You know, a sort of fancy store. They have insisted that their lady clerks wear midi, what do you call them, midi dresses, because they want them to encourage them to be sold, you know, so I think they're going about it the wrong way. I would think that more people would buy them the less they see what they look like, but I don't want to offend anyone. How about that guy who got on the 747? They're being criticized, the airlines, because he got on, hijacked it to Cuba, and he was wearing, this is true, it's incredible, he was wearing a sort of Che Guevara outfit and a Cuban emblem on his cap, and they still didn't spot him, and he got through that device they have. That's right. And he got through the thing that detects a concealed weapon in your clothing. But he outsmarted them on that. He carried it in his hand. But I want to... Oh, and weirdest thing in Los Angeles. Do you have another few seconds? In Los Angeles, they had this experiment. They took 1,000 male worms of a certain kind. This is on the science page. And they sterile male worms and mated them with normal female worms to see if they could eradicate that species. And it's working. Now, what broader application this has, I don't know. It just may be coincidence that Governor Reagan put in an ad for 1,000 Democrats with war wounds, but you wouldn't say a thing like that if you hadn't been in a tank with whales, I realize. Listen, I've got to get out of here. There are a whole lot of people backstage waiting to get out and see what I'm really like. So we have tonight's guests are Mort Sahl and Rosalind Drexler, a very unusual authoress, and critic John Simon and Alice Playton, and we'll all be back with that. This is it. We'll be back. To jump into the tank with the whales, and I said yes. Oh, a lady asked me what the purpose of that was. We'll show you the film on the show, and then we'll decide. But not tonight. My first guest is a gentleman who always has a witty or a funny thing to say, or both, and he says it in his own inimitable style. I don't know anyone quite like him. Will you welcome Mort Sahl? Yeah.
Oh, is it so long? Yes, greetings to all of you there. Yeah, I saw you 5 months ago here on the show.
So long.
And we had a very serious show that night with a dedicated actress. It was a dedicated actress who was worried about something. And, you know, but did we talk about this, dedication on shows?
I don't remember. Let's do now.
It's dedication on talk shows.
Okay.
And they always come out and they say, you realize this is hypothetical what I'm drawing here.
Oh, okay.
I would say, gee, it's great to see you, Johnny. And, I mean, to the guest. It's an actor.
Oh.
And then the actor says, we'll differentiate. And then the actor says, I'm not here as an actor tonight, Merv. I'm here as a citizen. It's almost like a threat. You know, and I keep wanting to say, would you consider going back to being an actor? But, you know, I never have a chance being in the great unwashed out there. And they say, I'm here to talk about the nation's #1 killer. You know, the William Morris Agency or whatever. or DDT. They certainly are dedicated actors. And, of course, I sound like I'm putting them on. I think what I have against them more than anything else is that they're completely ineffectual. If I were a candidate, if I were an actor,
right.
Let's take things that are easier to accomplish. If I were, let's start small. If I were an actor and I wanted to help a candidate, I would endorse his opponent. I believe an actor sitting next to to a candidate destroys him. Now, this is going on in California now.
Well, do you think that's true? It's true from actor to actor, more so some than others, isn't it?
You mean I shouldn't generalize?
Well, yes, of course. How can you broadly sweep your broom over all of our thespian friends?
Well, generalization. It's true. You've cultivated a pretty bright group here. Well, while generalization is kind of stupid, there's a grain of truth in every generalization, and that's the one I'd like to emphasize at this point.
All right.
Actors have got that thing. I don't take any of them seriously. Well, let's talk hypothetically again. It's always safe. I mean, let's pretend we're on educational TV, and it doesn't count. For instance, if you see Marlon Brando sitting next to a candidate, do you really think that would be the same as my sitting next to a candidate? Now, if that sounds like self-aggrandizement, I want to remind you of how angry people get when I bring issues up. And that's a form of impact, I feel. It's a different kind of applause. People are not indifferent when I bring up issues. And as you know, I've brought up my share of issues on this show. Actually, I haven't brought up my share. I've only brought up one, which is not my share, but I've only brought up the one. Most actors come on and they talk. I don't see the world as unrelated. I see it all as, you know, the family is man and the cause is humanity. What is it? The family of... We all belong to the family of man, but we eat here at 6 and don't be late. I think it goes something like that. Anyway, what's...
I've been going to ask you if you've ever found a problem I know that's been bothering you for a long time, and your name came up on the show recently. You said that you never were able to find any intellectual women. Oh, boy. And no, you didn't say we weren't able to find any. You said a more serious thing. You said there aren't any.
Hey, you're really accurate.
Yeah, well, I try to please.
You're not in that chair for nothing. Let me tell you.
Guy's putting me on
I'd like
here.
to remind the network of that. Listen, no. Here's what I was going to say. About the, you know, that was when I was going to be here before. That was the show on which Hugh Hefner, gee, I don't want to hear the usual applause. Hugh Hefner, and, well, it's no good if I have to ask you. That's like saying, do you love me? It's not spontaneous. Of course, I would never put you to that test.
You were saying...
You just have to believe me. I was saying that Hugh Hefner was on here representing men. I was supposed to be on that program, but Hugh Hefner decided he would represent all men. So he doesn't represent me. I'd like to make that clear for the record. And those chicks from the women's liberation movement don't represent any girls I go out with. That leaves you. You represented humanity that night.
Oh, really?
I know there were periods in which you were tempted to withdraw, but...
humanity with a small h in this case.
But that whole women's liberation thing is really incredible. When they equate words like sexism and racism, getting back to your point, I've never met a woman who was an intellectual. I've met a woman who will want to come on with me, and she'll come on by using the currency of the moment. And if the currency is Confederate script instead of real money, such as talking about politics, she'll talk about politics. But in other words, if she...
Surely there are women with an intellect. I mean, Margaret Mead, what is she, a sex kitten? I've fallen in stature in your eyes, I can see.
Why did you choose that example?
I don't know. I could have said Hannah Arendt or Mary McCarthy or Helen Gurley Brown. I could have gone on and on. I don't know.
Well, of course, to go beyond the Valley of the Dolls, to extend our rationale here, I don't want a girl who will discuss Camus with me in front of the fireplace. I can do that with you.
Well, that's true.
And get a better discussion. I don't want that. I don't want that from them.
All through that Women's Lib show that night, your line kept going through my head, and for my own safety, I did not use it. Some years back, you said a woman's place is in the stove, and I just decided not to. You got a better
laugh with it than I did.
I guess so. Wait a minute. Here is a... while the hissing is subsiding...
They don't clean themselves, those stoves.
Here's a word about Gatorade.
I think I'll tell them that.
What did you just say?
Les Crane.
Oh, we're back.
Oh, are we back in the air?
Yeah, we're on the air.
I was just going to mention it. It's nice of you to sit in the same level with me. Les Crane used to sit above me.
He had that high chair.
I remember we'd all sit on the floor beneath him, you know, Pope Paul and the other guests on the sit below. But
there are no intellectual women, huh?
Yeah, there are no intellectual women. You know what the closest they come is this, that bright thing. And they get a couple of stickers on their Volkswagen, a couple of daisies, maybe a McCarthy strip if it's in fashion, and then they're intellectuals. But the whole thing of walking up to me and saying, hey, listen, are you still working with Jim Garrison in New Orleans? Let's go out in the garden and talk about it. The garden is the part of the conversation they're interested in. They're really not interested in what's going on. I just don't believe any of that. I just don't believe that with women. I don't believe their dedication. Now look at Eva Braun as an example. Now let me mention some women in history. Some women who stood by their men. Evita Peron, Madame New, Madame Chang, Marina Oswald, the #1 witness against her husband in what was not an adversary procedure. But, you know, you selected Margaret Mead, so I feel I can load this sample the other way. You know, great women in history. I don't think that we're looking for intellect. I think that that's a lie.
Well, there is the question. I don't know if I accept the idea that there aren't any intellectual women, but let that pass.
Hefner, by the way.
Why would you want one?
Has stopped airbrushing women. May I discuss this on the air?
Well, if you make it clear what airbrushing is.
Well, you see, in the old play...
I'm sorry. Well, you're the one who says define your terms all the time, so you've got it.
I think, if I didn't think this was important, would I take time for it?
I don't know.
You realize that the network could put another news show in this, and then we'd have another one before 11 and after 11. No, you see, Hefner used to just show these women, and they would just terminate. And now he shows everything. In other words, he doesn't airbrush out... how can I put this diplomatically?
Well, areas considered formerly photographically offensive.
Anyway, in the last two issues, he's gone the other way, and he shows everything, and the book now looks like the National Geographic. That's all I wanted to get to. Thanks for that leg up.
Took all this time,
so to speak.
Hey, you know one thing I always wonder about you? Is this true? You sort of ran away to join the Army as a kid. Is that right?
Yes, that's true. When I was 15.
Did you run away, really, in the sense of climbing out the window at night?
Well, a lot of you know, a lot of the young people out there are going to misunderstand this because of Vietnam and the futility that they feel. I'm addressing this to those of our affiliate stations in Stockholm and Toronto. They're watching. I was, during World War II, which was the first one I participated in.
Right.
You think that's funny, huh? One night I was on the Carson show. Is it all right if I mention that? That's what everybody keeps doing. Is it all right if I mention CBS?
Yeah.
Is it all right if I mention my mother? Is it okay if I mention New York Times? Is it okay? Anyway,
feel free.
In this, while they exercise no taste. One night on the Carson show, he introduced the master sergeant, and he says, this man's a real hero. He's participated in every American war since World War II. Now, you can imagine what a description of this country that is. Not to speak of this guy, but to return to our point, and to lift the program back up.
You're climbing down the ladder to...
World War II, we had a paternal figure, Franklin D. Roosevelt. And my view was that if the old man was upset about things, they were worth being upset about. And we had leadership. And we believed we could alter the horizon, young people. And so at 15, I volunteered to be an aviation cadet. Now at 15, I weighed 118 pounds. My wings used to go all the way across my chest. My neck resembled a string going up to a balloon. And when I used to put on jump boots from the side, I looked like an L, you know, standing there. You know. And I did it for women. I thought, you know, girls would really be impressed. And girls take my arm when they go out with me and put their hand all the way around it. They go out with me for the evening. I was an aviation cadet when I was 15. And my mother pulled me out of the Army. Then I went back in when I was 17.
Now, your mother pulled you out. Did she have to go to where you were training and say this boy lied about his age? Or
well, she wrote a letter to Drew Pearson. That's the way you get things done in this country. And, no, we, actually, what happened was, it was a pretty good war all the way around. Worked out well. It ended up at Nuremberg, as you know. There was a trial there. But there wasn't enough time to trial the Nazis because the crimes were heinous and were endless because 54 million people died in World War II. So the chief prosecutor, Richard Nixon, just pronounced everyone guilty, and we took his word for it. No, let's go back to our point.
Murmuring is...
You see, you can really be provoked. That's a good sign. You're not indifferent.
Would
That's
you,
okay with me.
Would you be talked into doing your thing for us when we come back? If
Why
you'll
not?
pardon
It's about
expression,
time.
standing up and do what you do in a club.
We'll see what happens.
All right, we'll provoke you. We'll be
What
back after a
clubs?
message from our local station.
Does this make you yearn for the boards?
Here's something you don't always see. Mort Sahl standing up. Right there.
You know, I don't work at nightclubs anymore because there are no nightclubs, and they're all gone now. Well, there are a couple left, but they don't count. I mean, they're all in Las Vegas, and people like Mike Douglas work there. And my grandmother keeps insisting I take her. Anyway, people like Mike Douglas and Merv Griffin sings there and all that. Anyway, but it's a different kind of entertainment that Phil Harris, Lawrence Welk, who's often a house guest of J. Edgar Hoover. It's not the kind of an act that I would normally go to see. Anyway, Hoover, whom you know as I've described on this show as being in office 46 years and that as I admire as the finest director that the Bureau has ever had. First of all, I want to explain what all this is. You know, people used to say, gee, you didn't used to need props. Used to come out and just lay the truth on the people. Yeah, I tried that. And laying the truth on the people is like hitting them with a whip, not realizing that they put a board inside their coat. That's been the problem in America. This is made in Japan, one of our allies. And, you think that's funny? Try this. Free world. Ha, ha, ha. NATO. Cut it out. All right. Anyway. So what do I know? Would I be here if I knew? This, anyway, this is... Chet Huntley's gone to the big sky in Montana. Do you really think it was him, you know, or do you think it was the material he had? Because no, he's only as good as the news is, and you know how good that is. All right, it's interesting what happened to him. He moved from being a right-wing social democrat to being a left-wing fascist, all in the name of becoming a liberal. It's amazing what you can do under that cloak. Anyway, remember that. Hang that outside your tent if you want to affect change. This is made in Japan, and it's to protect women in a violent society. Now, no lesser a personage than Richard Nixon announced that our society is violent. In fact, he's even named some of the violent people in it and saved us the cost of a trial. Anyway, thank you. I have a lot in common with Manson. There's a lot of network heads who are putting an X on my forehead now. So to return to this, this is made in Japan to protect girls from violence. For instance, let's take an average girl. Let's talk about women. It's a good idea. I'm tired of politics. And because politics lead to elections, and I think the challenges, we're just not ready for them. So let's say a girl has an average job, like she's a systems data analyst feeding a computer over there on 5th Avenue at 58th Street on the shift from 11 to 6 in the morning, you know, average job. And she gets off at night and she wants to go home, see, and this is violent. Not that New York is violent, no offense, staff of the show here, but any city. Let's take any large city, Columbus, Ohio, any city. So I want to welcome our affiliates. So when she walks out with this, it costs $5, it has a light on it. See this strong beam that it throws? And she can make her way home, see? And it's, I think it was Mao Zedong who said, not in the red book because there wasn't enough room, it's highly edited, was the longest journey begins with one step ahead of, okay. So she starts home, see? Now a guy jumps out of the shadows, let's say hypothetically here, for the sake of violence on television, and attacks her. That's what this is made for. This guy is, I don't know what kind of a guy would attack a girl who's just trying to work for a living, but some kind of a madman, occult, weirdo, gosh, I'm really searching for the synonyms. A student, that's what I was looking for. Now, so, I like that hissing. That's good. I wish you could articulate your position a little more. Would help us at the convention. No, I didn't mean in volume. Okay, but thanks a lot. Okay, now let's try the locomotive, a real challenge to your intellect. So, now, she's got the light on and the guy has grabbed her, right? Now she turns this 180 degrees. Follow, this is very deft. And she hits this button. Now, from all over the city of New York, liberals run to her defense. And I'm lying there, and she's on the sidewalk. I mean, you know, they've come over there. She's lying on the sidewalk now. And they're all standing over her. She's still holding this. Okay? And they're commiserating with her, helping the way liberals do, saying, you know, I'd really like to help you, but I don't want to get involved. Have my work that... Now, listen, the last thing I want to talk about tonight is we've got a great station break coming up. But before you tune out, I want to mention a party I was at recently. I went to a party recently. I was invited to by James Stewart, and who is a brigadier general in the Air Force Reserve. I'm a private first class in the Air Force Reserve. That's not my permanent rank. My permanent rank is private in case of mobilization, but I'm PFC in a reserve. So anyway, he invited me to this party, and when I got there was a guy standing there, and I had known this guy in the service. I said, "You look familiar." He said, "That's because you knew me." And I was your pilot. I said, "By George, you're a colonel now." He said, "Well, I saw the danger of communism. I stayed in." And he had, so he said with a straight face, he's got these wings on, and a unit citation, a missileman's qualification badge, and a general war plan staff bug, and an aguilette, and a fourragere, his new organization and his old organization, and these birds off a flagpole, and these thunderbolts on his visor. So, although it sounds humorous separately, in totality, I assure you that it's very impressive. If you're 12. So we were drinking, you know. I think it's okay to say that, you know. We're not as advanced as some of these young kids. So, trying to alter their perspective. So, we weren't in New Mexico or anything, so we were drinking. This guy was drinking pretty good, you know. He's with that generation, you know, with the crew cut. The wingtip shoes. Pow! Pow! And he's drinking, right? Now, sitting next to him is several Air Force generals. So the colonel says to me, "You know, it's very embarrassing for me when I'm in places like Spain and other allies we have, and I have to explain these marches where the president's hiding in the White House. Can't come out because of the marches." So I said, "Well, why don't you describe the White House as the tomb of the well-known soldier?" So he said, "Well, that's not satisfactory." I said, "Well, yeah, I know. I was just, you know, trying to put it off." He said, "Well, you know, it's kind of embarrassing, and I'll tell you something else. I don't like the nature of the peaceniks." He said, "Why do they dress like girls? They all got long hair, got these scarves and everything, and everybody's going like that." So I said, "Well, that's nothing. You know, the president does it twice." So that didn't get him off my back either. Guy's really drinking now. He says to me, "I'll tell you something. You're forcing a confrontation, all of you." He said, "And if you keep up the demonstrations, and you keep up what you call a meaningful dialogue," another drink, he says, "we're going to have to take over." Very quiet in the room. Hostess is like this. No pearls. And the generals are all coughing a lot, which they don't do, you know. They're very fit, except when they retire. So, he says, I said, so I thought it'd be diplomatic, which is not my greatest talent. I said, "Well, that's very charitable of you to put that in the future tense about taking over. Good night, everybody." And I start to leave. So the guy chasing me to the door, grabs him by the shoulder. He says, "What is that supposed to mean?" So I figured, well, it's now or never. So I said, "I thought you took over already." It's very quiet in the room now. And the guy looks very exasperated, and he puts his glass down so hard it cracks, and he says to me, "Well, that's a service. Nobody ever tells you anything."
Here's a gentleman who writes theater criticism and movie criticism for separate magazines. He's read in New York Magazine most widely. And he writes things that have a large number of the members of the theatrical profession frightened of him. I suppose his name is taken in vain more often than almost any other critic. I often find myself in agreement with him, which is not always a fashionable thing to say, but here is the gentleman who's sometimes referred to as Bad John, John Simon. Right here. Sorry about that intro. Are you still in search of an intellectual woman, or do I have you confused with someone else?
No, as a matter of fact, I've known quite a few intellectual women in my life.
Any actresses?
Perhaps not, but I think there are probably as many intellectual women as there are intellectual ex-nightclub comedians.
Is X a judgment on your part? Is that a value judgment?
No,
or
it might be a step down.
condemnation?
Might be a step down or up, depending on how you avail yourself of your newfound life.
My newfound life?
Yes.
Realizing that the country's having a nervous breakdown.
You fellas know each other, do you?
No, it's just that bad manners don't work anywhere, even on television.
I think condemning a whole sex, I think, to the darkness of unintellectualism is not exactly the best manners.
Condemning a whole sex? Well, I don't know if it comes under the guise of manners, but of course we were talking about actresses, and it was somewhat segregated, and we didn't condemn Simone de Beauvoir. There were a few people we exempted. However, why talk about the world and important things when we can talk about the movies?
You want to handle that?
Again, I mean, I don't consider myself limited to film criticism. I do literary criticism, I do book reviews, I do drama reviews, I even do art reviews sometimes. I think the world of the arts is probably a legitimate world to talk about, yes.
Movies can have something to do with life.
Yeah, I can think of two.
What?
The Damned and Z and Willy Boy. I guess I thought of three. I can think of three now. The Battle of Algiers, 4.
Have you found that many films, John, that you would recommend? Or would you recommend those
What?
4?
You mean in the last few years, or the last few days?
I guess I meant in the last year. I always think of it in terms of the yearly roundup.
I think there have been some quite good films. I think a film like Joe, which is on right now, is halfway very good, and then the second half, I think, goes to pieces. But it's still a very interesting way of going to pieces, and it's a film that makes you think, and it's very well acted. It's a film that I think everybody should see, regardless of how perfect or imperfect it may be. I think a film like The Virgin and the Gypsy, which is on right now, is a rather intelligent, restrained adaptation of a minor work by D.H. Lawrence. Comes off fairly well on the screen. Well, that's two things right now.
You had to defend yourself recently on, well, I don't know if you felt you were defending yourself, but you know how you've been criticized for talking about specific physical traits of an actor or actress, and that they felt too personal that way. And then you had a column about the fact that, well, how personal should you be? That's what I guess what I mean. How do you draw the line where you're hurting the feelings of the performer when you say, as you did about one, that she's fat in almost every part of her body and so on?
Well, you see, it all depends. You see, what people forget is that people themselves, regardless of whether they're actors or actresses or critics or writers, are not the most important thing. The most important thing is that totality, which is theater. That is the sacred thing. That's the important thing. That is the thing before which we should all be small. Granted that the theater has shrunk somewhat, more than somewhat in recent years, and that it's not exactly in a period of glory. Nevertheless, theater, as it has been through the ages, and as doubtless it will be again someday, is a very great thing indeed. And individuals should efface themselves for the sake of this great overarching art. And so if an actor or an actress is undertaking a part which requires physical grace, physical good looks, the kind of charm, the kind of femininity or masculinity which the part requires, and if he egregiously fails to live up to these requirements, I think a critic is fully in his right to say this actor either should reduce or should do something about himself to make himself qualified for that part, or this actor simply couldn't possibly, or actress couldn't possibly look this part, is totally miscast. I gave as an example Judith Anderson playing Juliet, or James Coco playing Romeo. They're both very fine performers in suitable parts, but in those parts they would be a disaster. And one could only explain why they're disasters by saying the looks of this person do not match the requirements of that part.
You said you had another thing in there that I think you may be wrong about. Can we talk about that when we come back?
Sure.
And now a word. Now a word about the bathroom bowl cleaner with more active germ killer than the other leading brand, Sanaflash. What are you chaps talking about during the break?
I was just going to ask him, since he's defending women, how do you feel about homosexuals in the theater?
Well, there again, you see, it depends.
On what?
I'll tell you on what. Well, first of all, what? I mean, homosexual playwrights, homosexual actors, homosexual dress designers, those are all very different things. Most of the costume designers, for example, are homosexual. It doesn't, in many cases, prevent them from being very good costume designers. Many of our most distinguished playwrights are homosexuals, and some of their plays are very good. Some of their plays are not so good. I think the problem is not whether an artist or a performer is a homosexual. Again, the problem is whether that homosexuality is used honestly, intelligently, and to the advantage of the matter at hand. For example, if a homosexual playwright writes a play about homosexuals, like Boys in the Band, which is a very decent play, serious, honest, respectable play. I don't know whether its author is homosexual, by the way, or not, but assuming, let's say, that he were.
It's very well researched if he isn't.
All right, well, whatever he is, it doesn't matter. If the play works, and if, let's say, he is one, I mean, then more power to him for having used something that he knows about and that he feels strongly about in turning it into a decent play. If, on the other hand, let's say a homosexual playwright, whoever he may be, writes a play that purports to be manifestly heterosexual and thereby falsifies the issue, thereby represents heterosexuals in a way in which they really do not behave, in which they do not think, if, in fact, he is using this heterosexual play to infiltrate it with some kind of peculiarly biased pro-homosexual propaganda of some sort, then I think it is not such a good thing.
Could we speak less hypothetically and use some examples, if possible?
It's a little hard to use examples because, unfortunately, we live in a country that is backward enough to have laws against adult consenting homosexuals practicing what they want to practice. Consequently, it is a criminal offense to be a practicing homosexual. Consequently, if you name someone as such, you are committing an act of libel. It is a most unfortunate state of affairs. I hope that England, having led the way, we shall do better in the future.
Well, you know, before we make them sound like they're at halfway house, like it's a synonym, and trying to find their way back, I've never seen anybody poor who's a homosexual. They do very well. They indulge themselves.
Well, I mean, what exactly are we saying? I mean, if you mean that they're used...
They make a great deal of money in the arts, for one example.
Well, why shouldn't they? If they have the talent, if they have the ability, if they have the wherewithal, why not?
If they have the talent. Is it possible to have a piece of modern classical music performed if you're not established, if you're not in a homosexual community in America?
Well...
That's not a rhetorical question. It's just a question.
You happen to have the answer.
I'm not. Although I'm a critic of just about all the other arts, music happens to be the one I'm not a critic of, but I'm very fond of it, and I try to keep up with it, but I'm not terribly well versed about the underground dealings in the music world. I imagine that, though there are quite a few homosexual composers, I imagine it is possible to be a heterosexual composer and get performed, yes, if you have the talent.
Do you have evidence of a conspiracy on the part of homosexuals to keep heterosexuals out?
Yes.
Is it in an envelope in your pocket? Good heavens. Wait a minute.
It's a visual medium.
Look, I would say that the whole problem is not whether we're keeping out this kind of or that kind of composers. I think the whole trouble in the music world is that there aren't enough good, serious composers of any sex going around. That is the problem.
You seem to be saying during the break, in the part that I overheard,
Yes.
that perhaps you agreed on that thing that you took Mort on about when you came out, or if you misunderstood
Yeah,
it.
I was telling Mort that if he meant that among actresses there are hardly any intellectuals, I suppose I would agree. But that goes for male actors, too. I know 2 male actors who might qualify as intellectuals, and I've met some very distinguished ones. Needless to say, it is not bad not to be an intellectual. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And there's certainly nothing wrong with an actor not being an intellectual, because it's not with the intellect that you act. You act with your emotions, you act with your experience of life, you act with your sensitivity to how other humans and indeed animals behave, which you observe and reproduce. And this has nothing to do with the intellect. In fact, a great many directors, for example, who tend to be intellectuals and who sometimes take on acting roles, act execrably because their intellect trips them up in their acting endeavors.
Granted that acting is a mimetic form, however, I saw Robert Blake, I believe, on here, with you and Truman Capote, and
Yeah.
I found that he had more to say than either one of you, and you were both intellectualizing.
Well, quantitatively, he may have had more to say. It was impossible to shut him
No,
up.
he said more from the firing line. That has to do with his courage and yours.
Well.
He's been there, you know.
Been where?
Where has he been? Well, look at his record of performance. He doesn't talk about it, he does it. I think that Cold Blood is pretty fair work. I think his work in A Connection in Los Angeles, he did the play out there, is outstanding. I think his work in Willie Boy is outstanding. You don't think so?
No, I agree. I think he's quite a good actor. I wish to God he had stuck to acting instead of talking about a lot of things that he knows nothing about.
He seemed to think you two didn't know what you were talking about. That seemed to be the drift of it that night.
Well, let's say that the poor fellow, he didn't even know what we two were talking about.
He didn't even know the function of the critic and the dilettante. It's amazing how ignorant a man can become.
Well, what do you expect when you get 3 nitwits on a show?
What do you expect?
Wait, what have I said?
What about what he said about the church? What about what he said about Cesar Chavez? Was that without merit?
It's hard not having the transcript before us, Mr. Sahl, and having a message of interest to know. We'll be back with this.
As opposed to
I
what we're
think.
talking about.
Well, isn't this lucky? We have an actress with us. My next guest is,
See, she's against DDT.
she's appearing in the off-Broadway musical, The Last Sweet Days of Isaac, and which I believe Mr. Simon liked. And she is also in an Alka-Seltzer commercial that people see a lot, and she's a very funny young lady and a bright one. Will you welcome Alice Playton, or not?
What am I doing here?
I don't know. It's up to you to defend your entire sex in
I
the
see.
minutes allotted to us.
Guess what?
Well, there's been certain aspersions cast
They
on...
can be first-class girls. They're just second-class guys. That's my only point.
Oh, dear.
Oh,
They're great at what they do. Man, intuition, compassion, tenderness, insight. Fantastic.
All of that. Well, I happen to know that you had lunch with some IBM people today. What does that mean?
I don't have
Ferdinand?
no idea. No, they.
You didn't?
I'm doing some sort of an industrial film for them, and so these IBM execs took me to lunch, to see what I thought of the script.
Did they try to fold, spindle, or mutilate you in any way? Or...
Not so you could notice.
No.
No.
Were you able to talk with them and not find that they were so wrapped up in their business that they...
They were more wrapped up in my business, I think.
Yeah?
They really, I mean, they were just, all talking about theater and everything. So.
Yeah. Do you know these gentlemen, Mort Sahl and Mr. Simon? You've
I
ever
met Mr. Simon.
Do you find that Mr. Simon is dreaded among your colleagues, or did I exaggerate in the introduction?
one is always curious to see what and how Mr. Simon will phrase what he's thinking. I have often, many times, agreed pro and con with Mr. Simon. I never would have put it in those words exactly sometimes, but it's like I read his reviews aside from wanting to know what he thought of the play, but how he will write what he writes. I mean, it is Mr. Simon that I read, as opposed to reading a review of a play. Do you know what I mean?
That he sort of comes through as a personality. Do you mean that?
Definitely.
Yeah. You've been awarded all kinds of things, or up for awards. Didn't you win the Clio Award for that commercial,
Yeah, I
whatever
still
the
haven't
Clio
seen it.
Award is?
I told you they
Yeah,
gave
what
it
is
out at
that?
the luncheon and didn't invite me to.
And you didn't get to go?
No. No, it's supposed
Forgot
to
to
be
ask you to come.
Yeah, it's supposedly on the way, but I still haven't seen it. We've done a sequel to that commercial in the meantime, which will be out 2 months later, The Newlyweds. See, it's based around a heart-shaped meatloaf this time.
Very glad to hear that. I know you were nominated for a Tony Award. Did that ever come off?
Well, no, I never received it. It was sort of funny. I was nominated for a role that I did in Henry, Sweet Henry, which was a short-lived musical. And I was nominated for Best Supporting Actress in a musical at the time. Now, by the time the awards came around, which was April or May, the show had closed months and months before. And I was on the unemployment line, in fact, earning at the time $55 a week. So I get the invitation in the mail to the Tonys, and to my surprise, it turns out the nominees are required to pay for their own tickets, which is $35, and you must go to the party, which is $25. Now that, my friends, is $60, and I was only making $55, so I thought, well, if I'm definitely not winning, why go, you know? And I thought, well, wouldn't it be terrific if I could just get maybe a $5 seat in the balcony? And if they say, and the winner is Alice Plain, I'll say, I'll be right down. You know, and I thought, maybe that would teach them to pay for it or something.
Or
I just think that's sort of terrible.
Someone in an expensive seat
Of
could
course,
accept for you
yes.
if they didn't want to show any poor people
Right.
on the show.
Right. Of course, if you're in a hit, usually your producer, I am told, picks up. But I wasn't in a hit, see, which was the catch.
Okay. We have another message from our locals. We'll be back after this message. Would be interested in knowing what you just said. We came back.
Well, we could say it again.
Yes. You pointed out that
I did 31 network talk shows last year. That doesn't...
different ones?
31 different talk shows. Isn't that incredible?
Yes.
That's including, you would like me to document this.
I don't want to hear 31 names, no. 31 network talk shows.
Geez, you flippant guys. I bet there's some things you take seriously, though.
Just finish the sentence.
Old Glory waving over a foreign country. Listen,
Now, wait a minute.
does it deserve more? But
Lost me
that's
there.
right.
You were saying that we're quiet.
I said I did 31 network talk shows in a calendar year, 1969. That doesn't count Frost or any syndication. It also does not count Carson, because Carson is off limits, because we brought him the largest audience he ever had, 14 million men, with the author of this book about to be published by Putnam, by Jim Garrison, about how your president died and the men who did it. It's funny who winds up selling soap on a network, isn't it? We took that 9 million and blew it up to 14 million. 31 shows without that one. 31.
Well, I don't know if I get the whole implication of that. I mean, were you barred
The
from...
entire part of it?
Were you barred from...
Probably because he got 2,000 to 3,000 wires the next day accusing him of trying to keep the district attorney from speaking because he interrupted him 25 times in the first 17 minutes, which I'd call being a great MC. That's really handling your own show, isn't it? I think if you can get the guests not to talk at all, it's even better. Sometimes you can get them to stay home if you call them. But it's all right. Just out here doing my job, Dick.
But you put me in an awkward
You
situation.
asked me to say something
back-
from before
Yeah, but to...
about talking to the audience.
Yeah, but whenever a guest in any sense knocks my competition, I feel a little
Well, would
uneasy
you like me
about
to
it
come off the
because-
hook?
Yes, I
Since you
think you
didn't
should
do it?
say something nice about my competition now.
I can't take you off the hook that way. He has to take himself off the hook.
When your basketball game is
To hell
over,
with him. Now, listen.
It's too bad about it, you know, but there is a God. You got to settle with him. I hate to bring that as a network bulletin.
No.
This is
You will probably tell us what his name is, too.
I know what it is. I finally found out what it is, John. You have no sense of humor.
Well, if having a sense of humor is doing what you do, then I just as soon not have it. Thank you.
When you indict me, you indict those people who've been listening to it for 17 years. If you'd like to call them all morons, it's safe. They can't come down here and lynch you.
I'm not calling anybody anything, but I think that you did something extremely humorless a minute ago when we were off camera.
Which was what?
Which was to say, okay, boy, if you want to take me on, but you'll be sorry. I consider that one of the most humorless remarks
You
I've
also
ever heard.
swore at me. Why don't you tell them that?
Well, that's not the point. The point is
And
anyone
you know
who-
that if you weren't on television, you get punched for swearing
Look,
at people.
anyone who thinks that
Unless
he's-
you mix in a Third Avenue society where everybody talks the way and nobody hits.
I didn't swear at you, by
Yes,
the way.
you did swear
How
at
did
me.
I swear at you?
Would you like the word? I'm
Tell
sure
me,
he
yes.
wouldn't.
I'd love it.
You all know it, and it sums up your contribution.
Oh, I see. Well, if you consider that a swear word, my God, how are you going to be the great fighter for the liberal causes that you're going to be if you're going to be put off by a little four-letter word like that?
Well, as a matter of fact, they believe that I am that man. So again, you got to take them on. They believe that I am that fighter.
All right, fine.
The audience believes me. It is not indifferent.
It's...
And, you know, all those causes are waiting there. You know, we're a little understaffed.
I know, but this is not where you're going to win those wars, unfortunately. I wish
Where
it
do you
were.
win them?
I don't know.
I'd like your expertise on it.
I do not have any expertise on that
Hiding in the
subject.
movies on Third Avenue?
Well, if you're a film critic,
I'm sorry you're disinterested.
if you're a film critic, you don't hide in the movies, you work in the movies.
Who made you a film critic? Who appointed you a film critic?
The magazines that I write for, I guess.
And the world outside? And the people?
Look, if everyone were to do his job, if the film critics did their film criticism better, if the politicians did their politicking better, if the comedians did their comedianing better, I think it would be a perfectly okay world.
Small hands, small feminine hands.
I'm sorry to say that, unlike you, I don't measure the sense of a remark by the amount of applause it produces. That is not the kind of reaction or the kind of effect that I'm looking for. You evidently are.
Sometimes as a performer, you know, it's nice to get a reaction from the audience.
It's nice if one can get the audience to enact more liberal laws, for example. That would be by exerting pressure on their congressmen and the judiciary and so on. That would be a great thing. But to get applause for bright remarks that we make here, it's not going to
You
change
believe
the world.
it? You actually believe that these people will exert pressure on a congressman and the laws will change?
If they did it long enough and steadily enough, yes.
Groundswell of public opinion.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you indict them for not doing it? Because nothing's changed.
Well, you see, who am I to cast the first stone? I haven't been all that unremiss about my political responsibilities, so I will not indict them, no. I wish they would do it. I wish I would do it. And I think we both fail, they and I. And probably you, too, in some ways.
I fail? Well, it's interesting, you know, Victor Lasky, in a book called JFK, The Man and the Myth, who was an executive, a fairly highly placed executive in the Republican Party, says that I am one of 5 men who elected John Kennedy president in this country. He said that. Nobody said it on television, so I know that doesn't make it truthful or official. But he said it in a book. That gives it a certain legitimacy. I don't think I failed, and I won't be failing. By the way, next month, I'll be taking off, and I'll be hitting about 300 universities. And fortunately, they want to listen, and they want to change things. And they're not afraid of inheriting other people's problems. And they're also not cynical enough to give up. But we don't, you know, I don't subscribe to failure. When I started in this country, the Warren Report was official. When I finished, 88% of the American people did not believe it. That's Lou Harrison, Newsweek. That's one example. I could give a few more, but it's not my program.
Well, certainly not mine. We will return after this message from our local Continuing in our gallery of portraits this evening, I thought I'd bring on a lady who wrote a book.
Good.
You'll admit that's possible, right?
What, that a girl could write a book?
Yes. Her name is...
Choosing upside, you're not supposed to do that.
No, that's true. I'm a moderator, and my place is in the middle. My next guest is a novelist and a playwright, and she's written this novel, which is called One or Another, and she once wrote a very peculiar play, which I read about but did not see off Broadway, in which a lecherous priest was played by a real priest, which is an odd thing to have happen, and had a love scene staged as a wrestling match, and a lot of other odd facts that I know about it. And I hear that she is an interesting lady. Her name is Rosalind Drexler. Here she is. Hello, do you say Rosalind or Rosalind?
I say Rosalind, but everybody misspells it. Sometimes it's Roseline, Rosalind, Rosalind, Rosalinda. It's a nice name to play with.
I'm quitting after tonight.
Yeah. No, yes.
I'm sorry.
I was watching
I'm
the
sorry
whole thing.
the way Alice Playton has been dominating the show here.
Yeah,
but,
I have some things to say to Alice and some things to say to Mort, and I can't believe it.
You have some things to say?
Yeah, but you asked me some things first because I think maybe
Okay.
we should talk about one or another
All
a
right.
little bit.
What are the things you have to say to Mort and to Alice?
Well, should I say it very well? I'll start with Mort because you're at the end. You said something about making love in front of a fire. Do you have to have it that romantic? And you know, a lot of people set fires to excite themselves. I mean, is this a prerequisite for you?
Didn't I say, I know this is the good, back to the good old days in television, it's an hour ago. We got to review the show. I'll wait until, see what Ben Gross says. Check it out. It's my favorite newspaper. It's because I want to win public acclaim, play it safe. But to get back to your point, I said I could talking about Camus in front of a fireplace.
Yeah.
I never said anything about making love.
Anyway, men or women.
Talk about Camus
You
in front of a
just
fireplace?
stay there because you want to get warm. I mean, that's
you
what a
don't
fire's for.
Discuss anything
depends
with
on your
people in front of a fireplace?
I discuss all sorts of things. Yeah.
Can we go to your next point?
What's my next point? No, I was going to talk to Alice. No, I mean, you
See,
know.
now that depends what your apartment's like. Now, I have a one-room apartment with a fireplace. I do everything in front of my fireplace.
I have a painting in front of my fireplace. It doesn't work. They tell me that if you light that fireplace, the whole building will be full of smoke and we'll have to leave, you know.
Oh.
Anyway. What? Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to get in on the conversation.
I don't know whose word this is, but
Well, don't drink it if you
that
don't
was
know whose it
Mort's
is.
I'll turn it around and, like, wipe it.
Yeah, otherwise, you know, we have a relationship in the Indian culture.
Yeah, you were going to say
Do you
something.
know that if you rearrange the letters in Platon, it spells penalty?
Yeah.
I'd never thought of that.
I thought I would give the conversation a little wrench,
God.
you see, into
How long did
another
that take?
James
direction.
Thurber once told me he could rearrange the letters of my name and add I and he'd get hailstorm.
That's right.
And I would say, he said that to me on a television show, and I would say that the level of television has gone down ever since. But television gets enough of a beating, so we'll leave it alone. Yeah. What else were you going to tell me?
I was going to tell Alice, like, she cooks this terrible thing, and her husband is, like, barfing in the bathroom.
No, wait a minute.
And
This
why
is-
haven't
this
you
is
eaten
out-
the same food? Why are you so healthy and, like, he's sick in the bathroom and has to take out...
You're talking about in the commercial?
Yes, can we clear that up?
Commercial.
Yes, clarify that,
And, like,
Alice.
the marriage is based on total deception.
I'm
like,
single.
sooner or later it'll come out, right? That he hates your cooking and he can't stand you, right? Because, like...
No,
And you
just...
think you have to please him through a meal. There are other ways to please men.
Shall we dissect the commercial?
Go ahead.
1 second at a time?
Yes, I think the country's ready for that.
I think the country... No, when we do the sequel 2 months, obviously, it is one of the better love relationships because he's put up with the cooking. Why can't people accept that it is a commercial and 1 minute of some interesting viewing that it seems that most of America has enjoyed?
You mean
why must it be criticized for this? I really didn't hear that.
Where do you all see yourselves in 5 years?
Oh, God.
Oh,
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
In front of a fireplace, surely.
Yeah.
Very facile and very inaccurate. I'll either be in a detention camp or I'll be the Vice President of the United States, which, as you know, is better than being president in some circumstances. Where do you see yourself, Dick, in 5 years? Do you think about it?
I never think about it.
Ever?
No, I never do. I'll go up to 3, but 5.
Rosalind, where do you see yourself in 5
Go
years?
up to 3 because somebody asked me to be a professor at some University of Rochester, and I couldn't commit myself for 3 whole years because I don't know what's going to happen.
Rosalind, have you ever been a lady wrestler?
Yeah, but let's not talk about that. It was just a way of getting close.
I thought people would be startled at that question, but I happen to know that you were.
I
were, in
know.
fact,
Everybody.
a lady wrestler. at
Other
some point.
things have happened to me
Yeah.
besides that. Besides flying through the air and traveling throughout the United States. Like I just received a Guggenheim for playwriting. I received an OB, and I've had 3 books published, and well, things like that.
I just thought
But
it
it's
was-
not as funny as wrestling, so I could be a weirdo, which
Have you kept up? Have you kept up your painting, Rosalind?
Painting, I'm in collections of lots of museums.
But are you still doing it?
No, I can't do it right now. I can't do it because, it's a full-time thing. It's a whole life. Right now, I'm finishing another novel. I'm writing a full-length play. It's a musical about a teenage rapist. And, well, like anything.
Shame we can't do a scene from it tonight, but we have a message from our local stations, and we'll be right back. We're back, and my guests, as you know, if you joined us later, Mort, Sahl, and John Simon, and Rosalind Drexler, and Alice Playton. We don't have a lot of time left.
No, you
I
put
didn't mean
me
to
on
spring
last.
that lady wrestling thing on you like that, but
I understand
it is a curious thing
because
to know that a lady has been. Did your
we
husband
could have
find
a
that
go,
a strange?
We could.
You mean an actual wrestler?
We could do that, but not here. Like you'd
No,
fall
it's
off into the camera.
It's a little late. A little late in the show for
Late,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. How did you happen to leave wrestling? People always ask how you got into something.
As a matter of fact, it was so long ago. It was about 20 years ago.
Did you do it kind of as a joke?
I did it. No, it wasn't a joke. It was a job. I did it to earn money, and I was very good at it.
Yeah.
Everybody saw me, and they hated me. And, they said, get her. So, that was a big success.
Yeah. And did you always know that you were good at writing? And
Always. Yeah, I've
Really?
been writing since I was 8 years old. Yeah, that was my way of expressing myself because I was kind of a loner, and that's what I did.
Yeah.
To tell people what I felt and thought. And that's
How do you and Mr. Simon happen to know each other?
have you seen any of my plays, John?
Yes, I reviewed 1 or 2 of them favorably.
Yeah. Well, I don't know which ones they were. I know you saw The Investigation at New Dramatist, but did you see
Home
Home
movies, yes, very, very much so. I reviewed it for the Hudson Review with great
yeah.
enthusiasm.
Remind me. I'd like to hear good things.
How did you inveigle a priest into playing a lecherous priest in a
Well,
play? Is that a true
this
story?
priest is a fantastically talented man who writes music, Al Carmines. And he works at the Judson Memorial Church. And he wrote the music for the show and decided that he would also be in it because he could do it best. And it's an unusual church.
I wonder if there was any pressure on him to not. I didn't know a priest could appear in a theatrical production at will, but
Well, now the religion comes to the people, and theater is one way, I guess.
Yes, one wishes it were a two-way street sometimes.
Yeah.
did you see that piece in the paper, in the Times about a week back? An actor wrote a piece here in New York about the woes of acting. Larry Luckenbill was his
Yes.
name, and how awfully wretched the pay is and a lot of
I was
other things.
anonymously mentioned in it.
Well, that's right. There was what they call a swipe at you in the piece. I forget for what now.
Oh, the usual thing, for being bloodthirsty or something of that sort.
The gossamer touch of the Luftwaffe, I think, or something.
Well, you were right. I mean, you've got the right element. It's the air. I believe I was a scavenger bird. I didn't quite make it to the Luftwaffe yet.
I see.
No, the thing about the piece is that Luckin Bill is quite an able actor, and he's done very well. But that is something that he didn't talk about in the piece. He didn't talk about the money he made in The Boys in the Band, both the play version, which paid very nicely, and the movie version, which paid even nicer. He didn't talk about the commercials that he and his wife have done. He didn't talk about the soap opera that his wife has been on for God knows how long. He didn't talk about the fact that he was no longer in the show, or in fact was no longer in the show by the time that the article was published. I guess he still was in it when he wrote the piece. Why? Because he had gone to Hollywood to make a movie and rake in some more money. So it's not such a terrible life as he made it out to be.
Would you ever leave it, Alice? Acting?
You want
Is
to
that
leave the
proposal?
life? Are you calling
No,
it
no,
life?
I don't misunderstand.
I'll see. I don't think too much about what I will do next. I sort of hope I'll do next what I would like to do with the time that is happening to me. I mean, you know what I mean? I just try not to think too far when people say, what do you want to do next, which is the constant question you get.
Yeah, when Mort said 5 years, I can never think in
couldn't
those
think,
terms.
but I mean,
I go
if-
blank.
if-
Sorry, none of you can answer that question.
Well, I just
And I
want
think
to
you better
keep
start
on.
thinking about it.
I can
I didn't
think,
ask you to go into the closet. You know, you can be productive, but you better start thinking about it. I don't think any of us are in the junior league, with all due respect to the ladies.
No, I'm about as old as you are.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am. Oh, yes, I am, Mort.
Hey, let's all reveal our ages.
Doesn't matter.
Anybody
I
want to?
just would love to just keep on going the way I'm going. I feel so fortunate to be able to do my work and to have my family. You know, it's really fine. And then, of course, worry about the country. That's another thing that might...
Well, since we live in it, it's not at cross purposes, but, you know, it'll be fine. It'll be fine if we can get a viable left, and we know where the right is. Most of them are in office. And if we can just get rid of the liberals and their impotence, we'll be in good shape. Then we can go back to what we're doing.
Who isn't impotent? You tell
Who
me.
isn't
Yes,
impotent?
who isn't impotent? That's an interesting thing.
Well, I can think
You
of
say get
two
rid of the
people that aren't
impotence, you're
impotent.
talking about everybody.
Dick Cavett and I would be sharing a pup tent on the mainland of China if Senator Fulbright were impotent.
Wow!
Listen, I give you $265 worth.
You can say that in the last second of the show when I don't have time to understand it. We have a message from our local station.
That's my cover.
We're gonna go very fantastic. Rosalind's book is called One or Another. We've run out of time. Tomorrow night's guests called and said they're not coming. We have Hans Conried, actually Gloria Steinem, Henry Grunwald, editor of Time, and Mrs. Dorothy Wisbeski, and two otters, and I think I could wrap this all up in a word by saying good night, everyone. We'll see you again.
TWA 747, the ultimate in comfort and elegance. Wide aisles, oversized seats, the finest in-flight dining, and your choice of movies. Somehow you feel more important on TWA. French boy speaking. Good night.